Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and we're specifically going to talk about Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen. And so at this point, we are dealing specifically with the point when the player characters have actually found the City of Lost Names in the Northern Wastes, okay? And they come across us, and what they've done is they found a section of the City of Lost Names, and specifically it is the Threshold of the Heavens, okay? And what this is the City of Lost Names was a flying city previously, and it shattered apart, and there's parts of it all over the Northern Wastes, right? But this is the part that actually kept everything up in the air, right? Like the Threshold of the Heavens is essentially this needle that allowed the entire city to actually, that was the main magical focus that allowed the city to actually float, right? So you have this situation, and so the player characters reach the City of the Lost Names. They've been questing here, and the location itself was secret, and they got it from Dalamar, this Sylvanesti elf. Dalamar gives them the location. They go to the location, and they encounter another Sylvanesti elf, this one hundreds of years old, and who is an archmage, okay? And this archmage actually lived in the City of Lost Names when it had its original name, which was Onyari, okay? And so the player characters encounter Demlin, right? She is specifically an archmage. She is a Sylvanesti elf. And by the way, one of the things that's happening in Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen is it's like Sylvanesti's up, Qualinesti don't matter, right? It's almost all Sylvanesti elves who are the key players in this in Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen, which is kind of interesting because we get introduced to all these different groups of elves, but the only one that really matters in this book is the Sylvanesti, right? Like by the numbers and by impact and what they're what the elves are doing, right? So, which I thought was interesting, and I think again, it is my opinion that Dungeons & Dragons right now, we're never going to get another lore book. It's never going to happen, right? Basically, I think settings are going to be introduced through adventure books, right? Because the adventure takes you through a tour of the setting rather than just being a huge lore dump. I don't think we're ever going to get another lore dump, which I think is good, right? And in fact, I think the biggest thing we're starting to see is if a Dungeons & Dragons, every adventure needs to be fundamentally important to the players, right? And that means there has to be usable things within it, and that is species, spells, magical items. Those are the core absolute and backgrounds, right? And if you don't have those, what are you even doing, right? Like the book doesn't matter, which we learned from Radiant Citadel, okay? All right. So you have these, so they come across Demlin, and Demlin is this hundreds of years old Sylvanesti who actually predates the Cataclysm, right? And she tells the player characters about Onyari, okay? So the City of Lost Names is the new name for Onyari. The old name for the city is Onyari, and this was the name from Istar. And Istar is a nation that was destroyed in the Cataclysm, okay? And we get to hear this story about Onyari, aka the City of Lost Names, okay? So Demlin breaks it down and says, let me explain. Okay, so this city was called Onyari, okay? And it was a city in Istar before the Cataclysm, okay? And what ends up happening is there is so I think the timing on this is right. Somebody can correct me if the timing's off here. But essentially Takesis comes, and there's a huge fight, and Takesis is actually kicked out of Kryn and made to leave with a bunch of metallic dragons, and only a few metallic dragons remain. Okay? So at that point, now that all Takesis and all those people are kicked out, right? Istar is, and actually, Istar, yeah. So all those people are kicked out, and then the king priest of Istar actually at that point is feeling great because, you know, the Takesis has been kicked out, and so he decides to make a celebration city. And he actually decides to make a city that he can lift up into the sky, and it'll float around, and it's essentially like a party barge, right? The city is going to be this celebration city where everybody who helped this king priest can celebrate and live these incredibly luxurious, wealthy lives, right? So in order to do this, he actually goes to a site where lots of dragons, specifically metallic dragons, whenever they die, they go to this site, right? Which is, and that site is Onyari, right? So he sets up this city on a dragon graveyard, okay? And he specifically does this because he's going to use all the magical resonance of all these dragon corpses to lift Onyari up, right? So he does this. He lifts Onyari into the sky using the magical resonance of these metallic dragon corpses, right? Now, here's the problem, okay? There's still metallic dragons on Krynn, and they are furious, right? And they are so furious that they decide to destroy Onyari, break it apart, and send it crashing to the ground, right? Well, Paladine, the good dragon, right, goes to the Knights of Solamnia and says, hey, and specifically tasks Knight of Solamnia, Xanis Sarlamir, and says, I want you to shut this down, right? I want you, the dragons are not, you know, these metallic dragons can't just destroy the city of Onyari because there's a whole bunch of people on this city, and a whole, like, thousands will die, right? So, but on the other hand, these dragons are 100% right to be pissed off, and they have every right to be going for the throat on Onyari, right? So you need to stop this fight peacefully, right? And that's what Paladine. So Paladine tasks Knight of Solamnia, Xanis Sarlamir, that says, shut this down, but don't kill any dragons. Xanis Sarlamir goes to work, and he straight wrecks, all right, Zaravix, okay? Zaravix is a golden dragon, and Sarlamir, and Knight of the Crown, all right, Xanis Sarlamir kills Golden Dragon Sarlamir, okay, with a Dragonlance, which makes the whole situation even worse, right? Now, Paladine is very upset, right? And the Knight of Solamnia has failed, okay? The dragons are furious. They do actually break apart Onyari, and Onyari actually falls into the north, right? And it breaks apart and is destroyed, right? And so Demlin, this Sylvanesti elf, has told all of the player characters all this history, and is saying, okay, Onyari was this flying city, and, you know, and it was raised literally with the magic of these dragons, and specifically the metallic dragons. Paladine understood that the humans' offense, that the king priest's offense, the Istar king priest's offense, was horrible, and needed all this shut down. And a Knight of Solamnia actually killed a golden dragon, when that golden dragon was pretty correct to come at Onyari, and Onyari falls out of the sky and breaks apart, right? Now, the player characters understand the history of what's happening. Demlin and the player characters look out, and they look at the threshold of the heavens, which is the main center part of Onyari, right? And realize what's happening is the Red Dragon army are in the northern wastes. they found the threshold of the heavens, the center of the Onyari flying city, right? The center of the city of lost names, right? And what they and basically now the player characters see the full shape of what is actually happening, right? And what is actually happening is that the Red Dragon Army, and specifically Takesis, are raising the center of the broken Onyari city to use it as a weapons platform to take over Solamnia, specifically Solamnia, right? And Takesis is trying to use the Red Dragon Army, specifically Lord Soth. Takesis ain't even on Kryn at this point, right? But Takesis is trying to use this, the threshold of the heavens, the center of the flying city, as a weapons platform, specifically to take over Solamnia. And now we arrive there. Now we understand why the player characters are actually engaged, right? They understand what the Red Dragon is at this point. They understand how dangerous the Red Dragon is at this point. The Red Dragon Army is at this point. And very specifically, they realize the full scope of the plans of Lord Soth, right? Who is at this, and this, it's just pretty incredible, right? Like, Lord Soth is incredibly dangerous, but still, Lord Soth is still just an agent of Takesis, aka Tiamat, right? And actually, aka Takesis, it's actually Tiamat, right? And so, pretty incredible. This is where we arrive, and at this point in the book, the player characters really have a sense of the reason they're there, right? And why this, why all of this has been structured the way it is, and what the actual stakes are, right? And honestly, I have to say, like, this is lore that matters, right? Like, and at this point in the book, the player characters, I think they've gone from like first all the way up to like 11th level at this point, right? And this is a major, like, very significant, like, path, right, to glory for these player characters. And at this point, they're coming out the other side, and they faced some significant battles, but they're really getting a very powerful sense of what's mattering here, what's happening here really matters, and what is going on is incredibly dangerous, right? And they, and Dungeons and Dragons is really fully delivering on every word of Dungeons and Dragons. There have been dungeons and there have been dragons, right? And you see, and you're really just seeing the full shape of it, right? And so I'm incredibly impressed with what they're doing, with what F. Leslie Snyder is doing in Dragonlance: Shadow of the Dragon Queen. And this is a real turning point in the book, because at this point, you really understand why the player characters are here, and their journey to this point has been significant. But there's also, you're also get this sense that, like, what's to come is far worse and far more dangerous, right? And all of this is then even made even more important by not only, is this Dragonlance: Shadow of the Dragon Queen, but this is echoing back all the way back to 1986 to the Orange Spine Easy Dragonlance book, right? And it's pulling out the best parts of Hickman's work and Weiss's work and really highlighting it, right? Pretty incredible. I'm really impressed with this. I'm really having a great time exploring it, and I really appreciate you letting me share my thoughts on it with you. Every word you just heard is my humble opinion. I would love to hear your humble opinion on all this. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.